He was one of Winston Cup's youngest drivers who became one of its youngest ever winners. From his start with Harry Hyde in 1982 through his current stint with Junie Donlevy, this driver has learned at the feet of some of the sport's most gifted teachers. His 1986 win in Talladega at the tender age of 22 alerted everyone to the talent he possessed. Talent that shined brightly again this past Sunday with yet another strong run in Alabama. And tonight, you get to meet Bobby Hillin, driver of the Heilig-Myers Ford Thunderbird, on This Week in NASCAR. And now, from the studios of the Nashville Network in Nashville, Tennessee, here's the host of This Week in NASCAR, Eli Gold.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to This Week in NASCAR. Welcome to the TNN studios. For the first time in our 4 years of This Week in NASCAR, we're bringing the show to you from Music City. Glad you're along. Bobby Hillin, our special guest this evening. We'll be taking your calls and comments, and if you'd like to get online right now, the phones are open toll-free at 1-800-292-5551. That's the number to put you in touch with us tonight here on This Week in NASCAR. I'll tell you, This Week in NASCAR has been a very busy week as far as news is concerned. First, let's bring you up to speed on Stanley Smith, the driver who was injured during this past Sunday's running of the Die Hard 500. Stanley is recovering at the Caraway Methodist Medical Center in Birmingham, Alabama. His condition continues to improve every day. The doctors are upgrading his conditional reports each and every day, so the news is considerably better today than on Sunday regarding Stanley Smith. Earlier today, one of the mysteries of the last couple of weeks began to unravel just a bit. Robert Yates Racing announcing his driver for the number 28 Texaco Haviland Ford, the man who will drive the car for the remainder of this 1993 season. He is veteran Winston Cup driver Lake Speed, and he met with the news media in Charlotte shortly after 5 o'clock this afternoon.
But we're going to have to take it one weekend, one race at a time, and see where we are. My whole feeling about this thing is it's added more credibility to my name and my reputation than anything else that could have happened. The time is everything, as we know in most anything, and for me to be available right when they needed me the most is a win-win situation for Robert Yates Racing and for Lake Speed. And if we can go out there and do well, it's like I told Robert, I said, I have more incentive to sit on the pole and win the race than he does. And we're going to go out there and give it the best we can possibly do and do the best job we can do. I don't think either one of us is really too concerned about whether it's a one-race deal or 12 races. I really believe we'll be in there to finish the season out and run all 12 races unless something out of our control or out of Robert's control happens. And if that happens, like he said, we've both been racing a long time. We understand the ins and outs of it, the politics that's involved in it, and we know where both of us are wanting to go and what we're trying to accomplish with this marriage.
That's Lake Speed. Now, as many of you know, he has been operating his own racing team with the Purex sponsorship. That sponsorship ended effective with this past Sunday's running of the Die Hard 500. So Lake will run for Robert Yates the rest of this year while continuing to look for his own sponsor for the 1994 season. One other quick note, a lot of teams tested today up at Watkins Glen, the road course, preparing for the Budweiser at the Glen coming up a week from this Sunday. And one interesting note, Terry Labonte, who is moving on from the Billy Hagan racing team to Rick Hendrick for next year, had the man who appears to be his replacement driver tagging along behind him today, John Andretti, the former IndyCar driver, now making a name for himself in NHRA competition. He was up at Watkins Glen today testing the Kellogg's Cornflakes Chevrolet along with Terry Labonte, so it seems as though Hagan and Andretti now close to a deal for 1994. So that's the news of this week. Now to our special guest of this evening, a gentleman who, as we mentioned at the outset of the show, was Winston Cup Racing's youngest ever race winner and had a superb run again this past weekend at Talladega in his Heilig-Myers Ford. Bobby Hillin of Midland, Texas. Great to have you with us tonight in Nashville. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Eli. I'm glad to be here. It's a great city.
It really is a great city, and some great folks joining us here tonight at TNN. You had a super run. The big tracks have always been a Bobby Hillin kind of setting, and so too for Junie Donlevy. That car, be it Daytona or Talladega, has been particularly strong this year.
Well, it really has been, you know, especially in the 500 at Daytona. We were great in testing and qualifying and in the race also, and we crashed in the race, and we tried to duplicate the car, and just like so many other teams, you can build a car and try to duplicate a fast car, sure, but there's stuff that's unseen, and for some reason that car doesn't perform as well. So, you know, the last 3 super speedway races, and believe it or not, including this one at Talladega,
right,
we've been very disappointed with the fact that the car hasn't had the overall speed. We qualified 29th, and it's just a credit to the crew because they gave me good pit stops, and really it was good strategy. On the red flag, we decided not to take on any tires. We just got gas, and my car would run well in the draft if a car was behind me. So as long as someone was behind me pushing, we'd go well. And so we came out 8th, and cars followed me and kind of pushed me on up through there. And, you know, we sat in 5th place with 13 laps to go. And when Dale Jarrett decided to pull out, get himself in a better position, Bobby Hillin was dead in the water because there was no one to push me. And we fell back and you know, but anyway, we felt like we came away from Talladega with a better finish maybe than we even should have with our qualifying run.
We're going to spend this next hour chatting with Bobby Hillin, driver of the Hillin Myers Ford. Again, our phones are open to you toll-free at 1-800-292-5551. The name of our show is This Week in NASCAR. Tonight, from the TNN studios in Nashville, Tennessee, your calls as soon as we come back.
This Week in NASCAR is brought to you by the Heartbeat of America Chevrolet and your local Chevy dealer, by Smooth Busch Beer and easy drinking Busch Light, and by Kendall Motor Oil. Pour in the protection.
The Daytona 500, February '93, and right in the mix again, the Hillin Myers Ford. I'll tell you, you guys make drafting look easy, and we know that the drivers have not necessarily embraced restrictor plate racing. The fans love it. They never sit down anymore. You guys make it look easy, and there's a whole lot more to drafting than meets the eye, I know.
Well, there really is, Eli. You know, there's so many different situations you can be in, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, and you have to know which ones to be in.
Bobby Hillin is our special guest this evening, driver of the Hillin Myers Ford. Let's get to your calls at 1-800-292-5551. First stop is a viewer on Sports South, our host network here this evening, Ray in Powell, Tennessee. Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
I'd like to say hi to Eli and Bobby.
Yes, sir,
And
thank
first
you.
of all, I'm a big NASCAR fan, a Ford fan as well. And first of all, I was wondering if they're ever going to add restrictor plates to other tracks in NASCAR. And 2, how could a person get a pit pass?
Okay. As far as getting a pit pass, you'd have to either know a sponsor or get involved in a pit tour or something like that. Now, at certain racetracks, Pocono, for instance, you can purchase a pit pass for use prior to the start of the race. You can get down there, see the pits being set up and so on. That's not done at each and every racetrack. As far as restrictor plates, you know, folks, as this fellow might have remembered, you're going 190 into the turns at Michigan.
Right.
But the track is different. It's not
That's
conducive to the highest of high banks.
That's right. You know, a lot of tracks, Charlotte, Michigan, Atlanta, we're running really, really fast going into the corners. But we don't need restrictor plates because the way that the tracks are made and the fact that they're not as high banked, the corners aren't as wide, it creates a situation where we're getting off the throttle all the way, sometimes using a little bit of brake, and it spreads the cars out a little bit, and you don't just get a pack of 30 cars constantly running on top of each other and constantly staying close to 200 miles an hour.
Our next phone call tonight is from Connecticut, where Roger is standing by with a question. Hello.
Hi, Eli. How are you?
Great, thank you.
I'd like to ask Bobby. Bobby, what do you think NASCAR could do for, like, at Talladega, so you guys don't have violent crashes like you had last Sunday to help you guys out?
Well, you know, first thing I'd like to do is say that NASCAR's done a great job, and everything they've done has been twofold. You know, safety for us as racers and the fans, and also competition for the fans. NASCAR's created a very competitive series, the most competitive form of motorsports in the world, while trying to maintain it as being the safest motorsports in the world. But there's so much to know about aerodynamics, and the best aerodynamic engineers in the world will tell you that they haven't always got it figured out. So what we're learning is that it doesn't take a great deal of speed to make a car turn upside down. And now I think that NASCAR is going to sit back and look at the situation, and maybe, you know, I'm not saying that they're going to do this or they're not going to do this, but maybe there's a situation where we don't have to run as small a restrictor plate as we're running now, and maybe we can do some things to increase the speeds, get the cars spread apart a little bit, and maybe run a spoiler that won't turn the cars upside down when they go backwards. Either a spoiler with a flapper on it or less spoiler degrees. The more spoiler degrees we run now going forward means more lift we're going to have when we turn the car around backwards. So there's a lot of things NASCAR is going to look at over this next year, and I'm sure they're going to come out, they're going to talk to the competitors, and they're going to come out with the overall best situation.
Matter of fact, down in Daytona on Tuesday, I had a chance to visit with Les Richter. He's NASCAR's vice president of competition, and we were talking about just this scenario. And one thing, and it's not going to surprise you, Bob, you know what the NASCAR fans are about. Les was telling me on Tuesday, that's just basically a day and a half, 2 days after the Die Hard 500, they had gotten so many letters and phone calls and faxes in the mail from engineers, from fans who thought they might have had a better idea. And you never know when somebody's going to hit on something. NASCAR is not going to just sit back there and say, well, nobody knows anything. If you got a better idea, NASCAR is going to talk to the team owners, to whomever, to see what they can do to keep the sport as safe as it has been over the years. We're going to come right back with more of your calls for Bobby Hillin. As we leave you right now, let's check out the Winston Cup point standings. There's no Winston Cup race this weekend, but in 2 weeks it's on to Watkins Glen. Here's how the top 10 stack up. Take a look. Bobby Hillin got the call for the mellow yellow Pontiac. We all remember last year when the late Davey Allison needed an injury replacement. Again, it was Bobby Hillin who got the call, and Bobby joins us this evening on This Week in NASCAR with you from the TNN studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Let's get right back to the phones and head to Mark. He's up next with a phone call from the state of Georgia. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Eli.
How are you, sir?
Pretty good. I'd like to ask Bobby, from a driver's point of view, going into super speedways, had you rather be without or with a restrictor plate?
Well, I would rather be with a maybe a little bit larger restrictor plate. Personally, I like running fast at Daytona and Talladega. I like Dale Earnhardt's agreement as to what we should do, you know, as far as letting us run faster. But at the same time, I understand the concerns. We've got a lot of concerns with, you know, the fans and us as competitors. So, personally, I want to run over 200 miles an hour at Daytona and Talladega. It brings a lot more to the driver's side of driving that racetrack. But, you know, until we can come up with the right solution, we're going to have patience as a driver.
Let's go up to Framingham, Massachusetts. Josh is watching on the New England Sports Network. Hello.
Yeah, how you doing? Hi, Bobby.
Good evening.
I got a question for both of you. Bobby, what do you plan next year? You're staying with Junior Dunleavy and Eli. I was wondering if you could clarify some rumors. I heard next year that maybe Jeff Burton or Ernie Irvin may drive the Robert Yates ride. And has Ricky Rudd picked a number for his team yet next year?
Okay. As far as those rumors, Ernie Irvin was seen getting off an airplane last night along with Robert Yates. The plane originated in Houston, Texas, the home base of the Haviland folks. But today it was Lake Speed who was named as the driver. So, yes, that rumor has been mentioned. Jeff Burton's name has been mentioned. To be very honest with you, any quality driver, they've all been mentioned as a driver for 1994. As far as the move for Ricky Rudd, he has talked about number 88 and he has talked about number 10 as two numbers he'd like to use on his Tide Ford for 1994. 10 is still technically the domain of Bob Whitcomb, although that racing team no longer operates, so there's no decision yet as to exactly which way he's going to go. As far as Heilig Myers, they all set for 94?
Well, that's right, Eli. Heilig Myers and Junior are going to be back together next year, and I'm going to be their driver, and we're really looking forward to you know, working together. They got a great bunch of guys, and we're just working on getting better.
Let's get right back to the phone lines. Ed joining us in Albany, New York, watching on the Madison Square Garden Network. Hello.
Hello, Eli. First of all, Eli, I'd like to say that you and your show are a very class act, and it's never showed more than 2 weeks ago when your show with Davey, about Davey, it was just great.
Thank you, sir.
Comment. And I don't like to beat a dead horse, but boy, I would like Bobby Hillin, if he would please, to look in that camera, look me straight in the eye, and tell me that that a Ford at one of the super speedways running restrictor plates can lead one of those races and win one of those races. I do not believe it can happen. I think they can hang on in a draft, and I know Mr. Gary Nelson can sit there with a smile and tell me everything is even. But, Bobby, please, sit there and tell me with an honest face that a Ford can lead and win one of those races. Thank you.
You know, I think it can be done. In February, I think I was maybe the only Ford that passed Dale Earnhardt under green to take the lead. It's been hard on us this year. The rule changes kind of go back and forth, but you know, right now all I can say is that Ford, the Ford race teams, and all of us are working very hard, and we feel like we're going to be very competitive in Daytona next year and all the super speedway races.
And of course, the other point is Mark Martin is always in the hunt at any racetrack, super speedways. You've been in the hunt. Davey Allison's car is always in the hunt. Even with Robbie Gordon prior to the accident, that car was running competitively. So I know where you're coming from, but on the racetrack, it shows just a little bit differently. Let's take a quick call from Indiana before we break away here quickly. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Eli.
Hello, Dave.
I was just thinking that I really enjoy your show. I watch it every week.
Thank you.
And getting to Bobby, I've always been wondering, I drove short track for a short time, and I was wondering, do the big-time drivers have the same butterflies that I had when I was a short track driver?
Well, you know, different situations, maybe you have some butterflies. You know, all the drivers, I think, have a little bit maybe before qualifying because they know they got one lap to get the best lap they can be. You know, during the race, we're all very intense, but I wouldn't say we have the butterflies. It's just an intense feeling. You're ready to go out there and get it on.
We're going to come right back, take more of your questions for Bobby Hillin. Before we leave you, a quick thought about next week's show and the show thereafter. We'll be in Watkins Glen, New York for the running of the Budweiser at the Glen next week. Our show will originate at the Corning Glass Center right there in downtown Corning, New York. We'd love to see you come by in person and join us, or certainly tune in right here on Prime Network. In 2 weeks, we'll be back up in Michigan prior to the running of the 400 at Michigan International Speedway. We'll be at the Holiday Inn North Campus in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So those of you watching on the pass system up in Michigan, swing on by and join us. We'd love to say hello. As we break away, let's check out Winston Cup point standings 11 through 20 as we head to a commercial break. Don't leave us. We're coming right back. One of the public relations representatives that handles the Heilig-Myers account, and the man to pivot into your screen, Junie Donlevy, team owner for that racing operation. I'll tell you, it's got to be a treat working for a guy like Junie. I mean, he's like everybody's grandfather, and if you're your own team and you don't win, you'd love to see Junie win. He's that kind of a guy.
He really is, you know. He's super to work for, and we're just, each week, we just get better and better, and we're starting to jive, you know, and I think that that's good for our relationship.
He's always worked well with the younger drivers. I still call you young driver. Heck, when you break in, when you're in diapers, kind of like you did, you've been around for so long, you're still a young man. I know.
It's strange because I see other drivers coming in the sport, they're a lot older than me, and they say, this young driver and that young driver, and I say, heck, I'm younger than those guys still.
Let's get back to the phones and go to Jackson, Mississippi, a viewer on Sports South. Hello, Bobby. Good evening.
Hey, Eli. How you doing tonight?
Great, thank you.
Bobby, good race Sunday.
Thank you.
My question is, you know, I watched the Charlotte race, and Lake was running real good there. Probably had one of the fastest cars there. Would Robert Yates bring out a Lake Speed car for that race, maybe, or would he use his own team?
I would expect it'll be Robert's own car, his own personnel, and so on. But you're right, Lake Speed, every time they showed up this year, it didn't matter if it was Pocono, where it was, that crew always had a good, solid, competitive race car.
They really have. You know, Lake's worked real hard on building his team up. He's got a good bunch of guys, and I think this is just what he needs right now to get his race team going and operating for 1994.
And as a matter of fact, Lake was saying today as part of that press conference in Charlotte that they still have some contracts to build engines for some other drivers, build race cars for some other teams. So Lake Speed Motorsports will still be continuing as a very viable entity. It's just that the owner and the driver, Lake Speed, will now be hopping over to Robert Yates Racing. Let's go down now to Naples, Florida. Chuck watching on the Sunshine Network. Hello.
Hey, how's it going, brother?
Great, thank you.
Hey, I was just wondering, who's going to take over Davey Allison's car? Did you say Lake Speed was?
Right, just for the duration of this season, potentially further, I guess, but the announcement today was specifically about the rest of 1993, with Lake hoping to get his own sponsorship back in place for the 1994 season. Now to Ronnie, who's next on the phone line with a question from Beacon, New York. Hello, Ronnie.
Hi, Eli.
Hi.
Thank you very much. I enjoy your show.
Well, thank you for calling.
And hi, Bobby, and good luck.
Thank you.
And I have one question. Can you put any light on the subject of Jimmy Horton and his accident on Sunday at Talladega, and what the condition is of the other fella?
Okay, we mentioned everybody's getting better. In the case of Stanley Smith, his condition is improving. I think it was a freak situation with Jimmy Horton, because the car would never have done what it did by itself. It was given a good bit of help to leave the ballpark.
Right, he definitely got a boost, and you usually don't see a car get hit at that particular angle, but Talladega's Talladega, and interesting things happen, and that's an example of how safe our racing is. You know, Jimmy Horton put his shorts on, and he walked away and said, see you later to his car, and that was about it.
That's it. It was maybe one of the most bizarre days I've ever spent around a racetrack, though. I'll agree to that. Let's go to Kevin now, joining us in Fries, Virginia, watching on Home Team Sports. Hello.
Hello, Eli.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. I really enjoy your program. And hello, Bobby.
Hi.
I was wanting to ask you a question about the Ford engines versus the GM engines with the restrictor plates on them. It seems that I hardly ever miss a race that there's always a lot more GM products up front than there is Fords, and it seems to me like the Fords just aren't as strong as the GM products. Is there anything to do with the Ford engine versus the GM that would cause this?
Well, you know, it's hard to say. It's like I said a while ago, NASCAR does the best they can do to keep the rules close. There are an awful lot of good GM cars out there. Ford has been struck hard with the death of Alan Kulwicki and now Davey Allison, and Ford Motorsports has been through a tough year. But at the same time, you know, things go back and forth, and Ford is going to be very competitive next year. That's about as much as I can say.
Let's head north now to Saddlebrook, New Jersey. Another viewer on the Madison Square Garden Network. Hello, Terry.
Hello, Eli. Hello, Bob. I was going to say, Eli got a great show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We're big Earnhardt's fans here, and my question was pretty much the same as just before. The Chevy seems so much stronger this year, and Earnhardt's really making an excellent comeback.
Sure.
And my question is, with Neil Bonnet, is he going to be doing any more races?
Neil didn't say. I talked with him on Monday. I called him at the house in Bessemer, and he said, I really don't know what the future will hold other than his broadcasting responsibilities. He's feeling fine, a little bit of a tender elbow after the accident of Sunday, but otherwise, he says, my plans are still very much up in the air. Before we break away, Bobby, let's take a look at Rookie of the Year honors right here. You know what it's been like over the years battling your way up as a young driver. Here's how the Rookie of the Year standings stack up heading into next weekend's running of the Budweiser at the Glen. We'll be right back. In Tennessee, another good run for the Heilig-Myers Ford. They're trailing Lake Speed and Terry Labonte through the turns as we welcome you back to This Week in NASCAR. This evening from Nashville, Tennessee, our friends here at TNN, the Nashville Network, kind enough to allow us to utilize one of their studios for this evening's show. As we get right back to the questions, a gentleman joining us here in Nashville with a question, Kerry from Pegram, Tennessee. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
Enjoy your show, and good race, Bobby, Sunday. Just a question. Over the years, I've seen you drive different makes of cars, Buicks, Chevrolets, Fords this year. What kind of different handling characteristics do each of the cars have? And throughout the years, what particular make was your personal favorite?
Good question. Is there a definite difference in the feel?
There really is. You know, a long time ago, Jake Elder said, oh, I don't want this kind of race car because it's a loose race car. And he basically meant the aerodynamic characteristics of the car made it loose, and at the time I didn't understand that, but over the years you learn, and all the cars have a balance that you try to get, and you want to get that neutral balance, and some tend to have more downforce in the front, which make the cars push. Some tend to have more downforce in the rear, which makes the car push. Some have more downforce in the front, which makes the car loose. And you want that balance. And each year we get in the car, we try to balance it out, and we end up making it competitive.
Did you ever think when you started racing mini stocks back in the middle to the late 70s that the sport was as scientific as it's turned out to be?
Not at all. You know, I just, you know, I'm 29 now and still have so much to learn in racing and about race cars, and each year you learn just how much you don't really know. And I've been to Formula One races and IndyCar races, and they have all the engineers in the world, but stock car racing, it's still just as difficult, and there's a lot involved, and there's stuff that you can't see, and it makes it challenging.
Let's go down to Greenville, South Carolina. Rich, good evening to you.
Fella.
Hello, Rich. How are you?
Fine. Eli, I've only got two questions.
Yes, sir.
One of them is, how did the Derek Cope car do? Heard that he was testing a car down at Daytona, Mercury Cougar. Didn't hear anything more about that. And Bobby Hill and I congratulate you. I know it wasn't a win, but good run that you had there in Talladega. I wish to see the Ford go up front, but better luck on the next track. You could just answer those couple of questions.
As far as the Mercury Cougar is concerned, I talked to crew chief Bob Johnson. He said they just didn't have enough time to get the car dialed in as they should have. They needed some work on the cowl pressure and so on. But maybe I ought to ask you how that Mercury Cougar ran, because I understand they brought you down to Daytona as the drafting partner during that practice session.
That's right, Eli. I had no idea what they had for a car, and Derek told me on the way down it was a Mercury Cougar, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. And you know, unfortunately, they didn't get the car going, and we didn't get to draft any. But you know, it was a good try on Bob's part and the team's part, and you know, you never know. But you know, we're happy with the Thunderbird. I want to say that right now. The Thunderbird is a great race car. We're going to have a little bit different nose maybe, and there's going to, you know, all the four teams are working hard. The Thunderbird is a competitive race car and will win some races and be very competitive, you know, for years to come.
That Mercury Cougar was the backup car, by the way, at Talladega. Had something happened to the Bojangles Ford, they would have rolled that Mercury off the truck. Let's go now up to Atlantic City, New Jersey. Kaz, good evening to you.
Eli, how you doing?
Great, thank you.
Couple things. First, I want to just thank you guys for having your show. I think it's a great show. It's nice to see some NASCAR up in this area. Couple questions is, one, if you have any report on that driver that was injured over the weekend, and two, if I had heard rumor that Chrysler is going to get into NASCAR next year, and if that's true, did you hear anything about that, or you know, could you fill me in?
First, for the benefit of those of you on the Madison Square Garden Network who we understand joined us a bit late this evening up in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, Stanley Smith, the driver in question, is continuing to improve, albeit slowly, but he is continuing to improve at the hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. As far as the Chrysler Corporation, talk has been continuing that they might have something in store for 1995, but nothing yet for 1994. A lot of folks are saying to Ricky Rudd that he might be the man to have spearheaded the Chrysler program had they been ready for 94, and Ricky made it very clear that the Mopar folks just weren't quite ready to commence racing full time. So maybe in 95, everybody will watch and see what happens, and of course Chrysler still a force on the ARCA series. We're coming right back. More of your questions as we leave you. Let's take a look at some of the career statistics for Bobby Hillin of Midland, Texas. We'll be right back. The Heilig-Myers Ford, crew chief Doug Williams, another man who's had a lot of experience in this business.
Yes, he is, Eli.
He's a good man as he works on the Heilig-Myers car there in the Winston Cup garage area. Welcome back to This Week in NASCAR with Bobby Hillin, our special guest. I'm Eli Gold. Let's get right back to the phones and head up to Beantown, Boston, Massachusetts. Michael, how you doing tonight?
I'm well, thank you. Hello, Eli. Hello, Bobby.
Good evening.
I'd like to thank you all for heading up into the Northeast with some NASCAR racing at New Hampshire, and I'd like to say that I think I speak for everybody when I say we really enjoyed it up there, and I hope that you enjoyed coming up in the Northeast. My question tonight is in regards to numbers. How you mentioned earlier that Ricky Rudd would be possibly heading towards number 10 or 88. How is it that everything comes around to numbers? How do you own the number? Do you buy the number? Does the team have the number? And finally, Bobby, with NASCAR being so popular in the Northeast, although we don't get the newspaper reports, are there any other sports down in the South that you people like? I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for coming
College
up in
football
Hampton.
comes to mind, certainly, in many
right.
states of our union. You were a football player growing up yourself in high school.
That's right. I played high school football, and I love football. And I told everybody the story of filming the Super Bowl during the same time my son was being born. I got to film the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl and my son being born. So I'm a big football fan and Charlotte Hornets fan. So that's kind of what we like to watch. And
right.
Baseball during the World Series.
Exactly.
Right.
As far as the numbers are concerned, every team owner owns his own number, and that number stays with him. Now, over the years, we've seen drivers want a particular number, and they have been able to purchase that number. I've used the example in the past. Darrell Waltrip used to run number 17 all the years growing up. He wanted 17 back. He had to buy it from Roger Hamby. The old Roger Hamby team used to run number 17, and Darrell paid the money. When 7-Eleven became the sponsor for the Wood Brothers, they wanted that number, 7 or 11, on the side of the car. So the Wood Brothers kind of put number 21 off to the side for a while, used that one, brought the 21 back. So that's basically how things work. Let's head out to the West Coast now. A viewer on the Prime Ticket Network, Steve in Encinitas, California. Hello.
Hey, how you doing, guys? Thanks for taking my call.
Certainly.
I had a quick question for you. I was watching, I guess, a rerun of Pocono, and they had a guy come in for a pit stop, and they said they weren't making any changes on the car except for maybe some tires with different air pressure since they couldn't adjust the stagger. My question is the way I understood it, stagger was adjusted by air pressure, so maybe you can clear up what my understanding of that is and what rule changes were there to change that.
Yeah, I think it's basically an outgrowth of radial tires that has dictated how much you can do.
That's right, Eli. And the air pressure used to change the circumference of the tire, which changed the stagger. Now the pressure doesn't change the circumference of the tire so much, but what it does change is the tire has a spring rate, and the more air you put into it, the stiffer the spring rate of that tire is. So you can control a little bit of the spring rate of the tire, so to speak, with air pressure, and that's what the guys are doing, changing the air pressure on the tires. And what they might change is 4 or 5 pounds one way or the other, but really it doesn't take that much air pressure to change the spring rate of a tire.
We're going to come right back and take more of your questions for Bobby. As we mentioned before, the Winston Cup cars are off this week. They'll run at Watkins Glen next week. So this weekend, the sole domain of the NASCAR Busch Series, running at Raceway Park in Indianapolis, Indiana. The track opens for qualifying tomorrow for the Kroger NASCAR 200. Here are some facts and figures pertaining to that race that rolls on Saturday night. Take a look.
You're here in person live. What am I surprised?
Well, we're doing our show here at one of the TNN studios this evening at 10 o'clock Central Time, 11 o'clock Eastern, and I said it would be criminal to be here this early and not intrude on Al and Katie. So here I am intruding.
Oh, it's wonderful to see you. It's going to be fun. Who are you going to have on the show tonight?
We've got Bobby Hillin coming to town. I'm going to talk
the
about... he had a good run at Talladega last Sunday before things kind of went a little sour, but... you know, it's kind of strange seeing you guys on your own home turf. Only time I get to see you guys at the racetrack.
We did have Shauna Robinson's hood. I think that's out back now. But I do have a piece of Michael Waltrip's car.
Did you enjoy working on his pit crew?
It was fun. It was, you know, a little nerve-wracking here and there. But
I bet.
But it was a little different. But there's going to be a lot of talk tonight, I guess, about the restrictor plates. And I know that
I didn't know that was going to pop up there. That was us this morning here at TNN with Katie Haas and Al Winter on the video morning show that airs every weekday morning here on the Nashville Network. You're tuned to Prime Network this evening, though we utilize TNN's facilities for our show tonight. John is next with a question for our special guest, Bobby Hillin. John from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hello.
Hi, Bobby and Eli.
Hi. Good evening.
Two-part question, in a way. The sponsorship for a team, and how much does it cost a year to sponsor a team in terms of the manufacturers of the cars? How much do they help independents and the cost of a whole team? And explain wedge, whether they take it in or take it out.
All right. First step, sponsorship. Do the car manufacturers actually ante up or is it, in your case, just Heilig-Myers that foots the bill, or does Ford help out?
Well, Ford does help out, and all the manufacturers help out to some degree, and also sponsors. The sponsors pay the bulk of the operations. It costs, depending on who's running the operation, anywhere from, you know, a low budget is considered $1.6 million or 7 up to all the way 3 or 4 million. Now, it runs all over the spectrum, and the sponsors are all over the spectrum. So, you know, it's hard to just say, hey, this is how much it takes to go Winston Cup racing. You know,
sure, you can't pinpoint an actual single figure. Explain wedge when we talk about removing a round or two of wedge from the car.
Okay, wedge is basically the weight in the car, and as we turn left, the more weight we put on the corner of the left rear and the right front makes the car want to go straight when we turn left, and it makes the car want to push more. The more weight we take off those corners and put on the left front or the right rear would make the car want to turn to the left better, and that's taking wedge out of the car. So basically, it's just weight distribution in the car.
We've got a visitor from Darrell Waltrip's hometown joining us here at TNN tonight. John is from Franklin, Tennessee. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to Nashville.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bobby, I've often wondered, this question's for you.
Okay.
Does a driver, what percentage of the drivers watch a videotape of the race? And can you learn anything from that? Can you see mistakes made, etc.?
Well, I would say 99.9, 100% of the drivers watch the races on tape. You can definitely learn something. You know, when we're in the race car, all we see is what we're doing and who we're doing it with and all that sort of stuff. When we watch the broadcast, all the people that broadcast the race do such a good job. We really learn a lot. Sometimes the fans know more than we know unless we go back and watch the race.
Interesting. Now to a viewer on Prime Sports Northwest. Let's go to Scott in Portland, Oregon. Hello.
Hi, Eli.
Good evening.
Bobby. Hi. Eli, I think my question is probably more directed toward you. I wanted to know what happened to Rob Moroso.
Well, Rob Moroso passed away in a tragic automobile accident a number of years ago on a road in North Carolina. Of course, the Moroso family name continues on in the sport. As a matter of fact, Randy LaJoy, who had a super second-place run in the Busch Series race, the Fram Filters 500K on Saturday, drives now for Dick Moroso. And the Winston Cup car is driven by Bobby Hamilton, who's from here in Nashville, Tennessee. But Rob Moroso, a young man who had endless amount of talent, unfortunately lost his life in an automobile accident a number of years ago. Quick reminder before we break away here about what's upcoming on our next two shows on This Week in NASCAR. Next Thursday night, we'll be in Corning, New York. This prior to the weekend's activities at the Budweiser at the Glen. We'll be at the Corning Glass Center in Corning, New York. Come on by and say hello, or join us as always right here on Prime Network. In 2 weeks, we'll be up to the home of the Wolverines. We'll be in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the Holiday Inn North Campus for This Week in NASCAR. As we break away, here's a look at the broadcast schedule for this weekend's Busch Series race in Indianapolis, the Kroger NASCAR 200. Take a look. There's Ford and yet another Winston Cup garage area as Bobby Hillin waits for those last-minute changes before heading out to practice. This is Bobby Hillin. I'm Eli Gold. Let's get right back to your calls and comments now. We go to Frederick, Maryland. Terry watching on Home Team Sports. Hello.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Bobby what kind of car did he start out with in his early career? And also, I wanted to know if there's any plans for a NASCAR television channel.
Well, there is an all-sports or an all-motorsports channel that is in the works now. Bob Tullius, you might remember him as the man who ran the Jaguar program in the United States for many, many years out of Winchester, Virginia. He announced recently plans for an all-motorsports channel. Is there going to be an all-NASCAR channel? I've not heard about anything in those directions quite yet. Your first race car, what was it way back when?
Well, my first race car in NASCAR was a Buick. And I raced a Buick for several years before going to a Chevrolet and then a Ford. But started with a Buick, and when I drove a mini stalker, it was a Ford Capri.
Was it really?
Yes, sir.
Since we've got a guest this evening whose home is in Texas, let's go down to the Lone Star State for a call and head to Wichita Falls, Texas. Edward, watching on the HSE network. Hello.
Hey, Eli, how you doing?
Great, thank you.
I was just curious as to, I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I was curious as to why you think, and Bobby might think, NASCAR would not want to open up a racetrack down this way. Is it virgin territory for them and they're scared it might not work out, or they just want to stay in Indianapolis where everything is?
Well, I don't know if you can necessarily make a blanket statement. The College Station, Texas, has Texas World Speedway, where the Winston West and the ARCA cars currently compete. There's probably not a racetrack in America, as we've said on this show many times, that if they couldn't get a Winston Cup race, I mean, they jump. You guys could probably run 365 days a year if everybody who wanted a race got one.
That's right, Eli. The sport's very popular, but it's so expensive to build a facility that can accommodate Winston Cup racing. And I think as soon as a race facility in Texas that is in the right market is built that will accommodate a Winston Cup race, I'm sure we'll be there.
Let's take a call now from Tom, joining us on This Week in NASCAR in Margate, Florida. Hello.
How you doing, Eli? Great show.
Thank you, sir.
I wanted to ask Bobby a question and also a comment to you. What'd you think of Greg Sachs and the Country Time Ford Sunday? And for Bobby, I know Junie had already signed to Jimmy Spencer, and what happened with that deal, and how were you just sitting in the right spot at the right time?
Well, basically what happened is I was signed to race with Martin Bahrain Racing in 1993, and Spencer had made a verbal agreement to drive for Junie, and as they came close to finishing up their contract or whatever, Spencer changed his mind at the last minute, decided to go drive for Bobby Allison Motorsports. And that same week, Martin Bahrain Racing pulled out altogether of Winston Cup Racing. And Thursday, I had a fax from Martin say, look for another ride. Friday, I got a call from Junie and the guys. And Sunday, we made a deal, and it was just that quick.
As far as Greg Sachs is concerned, I thought he had a good run. At one point, he was up to 4th or 5th during the Die Hard 500. And the car backslid a little bit, and he lost that lead draft. But Greg Sachs, particularly on those big tracks, as we know from his victory in Daytona a few years ago, he's awfully strong. Now down to Atlanta, Georgia, Randy on our host network, Sports South. Hello.
He said I'll be next after.
You are next, Randy. Hello.
Good show, Eli.
How you doing, sir?
Bobby, didn't you have a chance to work with Harry Hyde, and where is he at today? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Wasn't he your very first?
Right. I worked with Harry when I first started, and Harry also came to us at Stavola's. We worked together for a couple years, and I went on and left Stavola's. Harry stayed there. And now I think Harry's gone with Melling Racing to be with P.J. Jones.
Yeah, they just made that announcement the other day that P.J. Jones, who is the son of Parnelli Jones, now has a couple of months off from the IMSA schedule where he drives the Toyota Eagles. So he's going to go into Winston Cup racing on a more regular basis now, and Harry Hyde has been hired to join that racing team. We're going to come back and continue our chat with Bobby Hillin, our special guest this evening, driver of the Heilig Myers Ford. So don't leave us now. We continue from Nashville, Tennessee, right after this.
This Week in NASCAR has been brought to you by Kendall Motor Oil, pour in the protection, by the Heartbeat of America Chevrolet and your local Chevy dealer, and by Smooth Busch Beer and Easy Drinking Busch Light.
Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, with Bobby Hillin, our special guest. This is one of those unique weekends where the Winston Cup guys have a break. Just a handful of your compadres will be running the Busch race in Indianapolis. You've got a weekend off. What does Bobby Hillin and Kim and the baby do on an off weekend? How do you kick back?
Well, this was going to be our first off weekend together, I think, all year long. And we were planning on going out and tubing on the lake and water skiing, but I hurt my hand at the shop the other day, so I'm just going to have to kind of relax and maybe just hang out on the dock while they go and have a little fun. I'll probably put Luke in the water with his floats.
There you go. Listen, thanks so much for joining us here in Nashville. The very best for the rest of this year and for seasons to come. We're awfully proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Bobby Hillin, driver of the Heilig Myers Ford Thunderbird. Again, a reminder, next Thursday night we'll be at the Corning Glass Center in Corning, New York. That's prior to the running of the Budweiser at the Glen. Those of you who might be up in the Finger Lakes region of New York, we'd love to see you in person. And in 2 weeks, we'll be in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as This Week in NASCAR heads to the Holiday Inn North Campus. So come by and join us or tune in right here. A big thank you to all of our friends here at TNN, kind enough to open their doors to us here this evening. We thank Bobby Hillin. Thank you for your calls. We'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.
We'd like to hear from you, so write us at This Week in NASCAR, 1625 Broadway, Suite 550, Denver, Colorado, 80202.